この車をお兄ちゃんが使ってたから、うちのお兄さんが車で、甥っ子がその子を送ったんだと思う。
今度はそのしゅうちゃんとこが上の方の方、下の子、嫁の方の具合が
下、その子が、でもその子ほら、今、やめてるからさ、ではないの、ではないと思うけど、でも時々、なんか、イライラしたり、やっぱりちょっと自分が上から見たり、イライラする、それから、まだ文化的ななんか人いる人も
This is why you can have a leading theoretical physicist sitting on a stage with a Christian apologist like William Lane Craig telling him point blank that there is nothing about contemporary cosmology that indicates the existence of a personal deity, only to be told very calmly that he's overstepping his bounds as a scientist, that he's not making the correct philosophical inferences from the data, that a conceptual analysis tells us that something can't come from nothing. You can't fight bad philosophy with science. You have to fight bad philosophy with good philosophy, which will always defer to science. And that's what I'm going to try to do today. Some of these concepts are going to seem really contrived and circuitous. Don't worry, it's because they are. And you don't have to remember any of this stuff. You don't have to use this. I just want to show you that it can be done. I want to show you some fun philosophical judo and assure you that bad reasoning backfires because it can be used against itself. Now, my example for this, I want to use the aforementioned William Lane Craig, because I think he's probably the most influential and respected religious apologist in the hemisphere today, and I think he proved that. And more specifically, I want to tackle his star quarterback cosmological argument. How many of you are familiar with this argument? Okay, I was just curious. Some of you have not heard the argument, but it goes something like this. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, therefore, the universe had a cause. There's all kinds of great objections to this. Obviously, getting from cause to eternal, all-knowing, all-powerful, personal, moral God is quite a leap and a debate unto itself. And so is the idea that the universe began to exist in any meaningful sense in the first place. That's not clear at all, scientifically or philosophically. But my focus here is going to be that first premise. Whatever begins to exist has a cause, because I think that's the one that most people on both sides take for granted. Now, the perceived strength of this is that it's simple and elegant and intuitive, but I'm about to argue that once you look under the hood, that is simply not true. So I want to talk to you about this causality thing, what it is and how it works, and the tremendous qualitative difference between any causal event we've ever actually observed and the kind of causal event that God creating the universe would have to be. Mostly, what I want to address about this argument is the cherry picking, the brazen cherry picking that needs to take place when it comes to which aspects of the causality we observe should be applied as absolute metaphysical principles and which ones we can conveniently ignore. Because the distinction, as I'm about to argue, would seem entirely arbitrary were it not for the fact that we know proponents like William Lane Craig are working backwards from a very, very specific conclusion. Okay, so let me lay some philosophical piping first. If you're not familiar, there are two super important concepts that Dr. Craig uses a lot in this discussion. One is creatio ex nihilo, which is Latin for creation out of nothing, and the other is creatio ex materia, which is creation out of material. Or to be more general, just creation out of some previously existing stuff. Now, right off the bat, let me make it very clear. Creatio ex nihilo, that first one, that is pure speculation. This is something that we've never had experience with or of, and anything you've ever actually seen caused to begin existing in your lifetime has been so caused ex materia, out of previously existing stuff. When we say that a carpenter causes a table to exist, we obviously don't mean that literally, because the carpenter isn't causing the table to do anything. It doesn't exist yet. You can't cause something that doesn't exist to do anything, let alone start existing. This is why the idea of God willing the universe into existence out of nothing should seem absurd on its face. What the carpenter really does is cause stuff that isn't the table, nails, wood, lacquer, to become the table. This is how the table comes into existence. And in fact, as far as our experience goes, this is how anything comes into existence. When material which was not that thing is caused to come together and form that thing. Okay, 2 more concepts I want to run by you. I promise I'll keep this short. Okay, Aristotle had this really kind of helpful way for talking about causes. He said that there are different aspects to the creation of a thing that we could be talking about. One of them, there were 4, but one of them is its efficient cause, and the other is its material cause. The efficient cause is the thing that you normally picture when you think of the word cause. It's either the entity or the action which is responsible for bringing the thing into existence. So if we take the example of a marble sculpture, its efficient cause would either be the sculptor or the active chisel. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. Okay, so material cause. We got the efficient cause, now we're talking about the material cause. The material cause is that previously existing stuff I was talking about, that this thing is created out of. In the carpenter table example I used earlier, the material cause would be the nails, wood, and lacquer. In the example of the marble sculpture, the material cause is marble. Fantastic. So the efficient cause and the material cause, right? The sculptor and the marble, the carpenter and the wood, the effector and the affected. The relationship between which is what gives us the effect of sculpture or table. Now, at this point, you may be getting a sense of why it's a little fishy to hear apologists like William Lane Craig claim that the premise, whatever begins to exist has a cause, is supported empirically, supported by our observation. It's not. Our experience doesn't tell us that anything beginning to exist. It tells us that things beginning to exist ex materia, out of material, have cause. Namely, they have efficient causes. But this reveals absolutely nothing about something beginning to exist ex nihilo, whether that's even a thing. And if it is, whether it's possible to have an efficient cause without any material, any stuff to act upon. How can you be a cause of something if there's nothing for you to interact with? That's my question. So a more honest version of this premise would be whatever begins to exist has a material and efficient cause. Not one or the other, both. That premise does enjoy empirical support. That is the best we can do if, big if, we don't cherry pick from our experiences of the world. You may be noticing the problem with this, however. The problem is that when you pair that with Kalam's second premise, the universe began to exist, the only valid conclusion that follows is, conclusion, therefore, the universe has has an efficient cause and a material cause. Not going to go over so well with the Christians. See, this is what happens when you take what I like to call a bottom-up approach to causality, to philosophy. When you start with what we directly apprehend about the world and you build from there, as opposed to a top-down sort of approach where we start with some metaphysical or theological principle or doctrine, and then we appeal to the parts of our experience that confirm or support that, and then we ignore everything. Here's an example. Here's an example of William Lane Craig talking as if he's taking a bottom-up approach, when in fact he's working from the top down. Now, there is no doubt that creatio ex nihilo is deeply baffling. I well recall thinking as I began to study the Kalam cosmological argument that all of the alternatives with respect to the universe's existence, the infinitude of the past, creation ex nihilo, spontaneous origination ex nihilo, that would be something coming into existence without being caused, were so bizarre that the most reasonable option seemed to be that nothing exists. Since our existence is, however, undeniable, we must settle, however, uncomfortably on one of the above three. Craig goes on to argue that creatio ex nihilo is more plausible than the other two alternatives, and I would actually argue the opposite, and I have in YouTube videos and stuff, but I don't have time to make that case here. But you may have noticed that there aren't just three options here. There are four. Craig seems careful not to mention the most plausible one, creatio ex materia, that God created the universe out of something. This is the only option of the bunch that doesn't require us to throw away some feature of causal interaction which in any other context is essential. So how does Craig get around this? Well, he would argue that unlike everything else that begins to exist, the universe, having been created out of something, is coherent. He says that it's simply overridden by the arguments for the finitude of the past. For if it is impossible that there be an infinite regress of past events, it is impossible that the first cause be a material object, since matter and energy is never quiescent. This was way too many words for a simple concept. I'm going to break it down. What he's really saying is that material causes exist within time and space. And since the beginning of the universe was the beginning of time and space, it's incoherent to claim that the universe had a material cause. Follow that? But if you think about it, we can say the exact same thing about efficient causes, can't we? Efficient causes exist within time and space, and since the beginning of the universe was the beginning of time and space, it is incoherent to claim that the universe had an efficient cause. What should follow from Craig's reasoning here is that the universe having any cause, efficient or material, is overridden by the arguments for the finitude of the past. I mean, after all, this should make sense, right? Everything we know about cause and effect from looking at the world around us tells us that when new things are caused to exist, it is by the interaction of efficient causes with material causes within time and space. In the observable, testable, knowable world around us, things do not and cannot be caused to begin existing without each of these elements. Now, this is the part where I always think that Craig would take the opportunity to try and minimize what our empirical experience can actually tell us about, general metaphysical truths, but he doesn't do that. In fact, Craig doubles down and he insists that anyone who isn't willing to apply our empirical knowledge of causality within the physical universe to the whole of reality is quote-unquote blind to the evidence. The problem is that by doing this, he doesn't realize that he's falling on his own sword. Quote, as for the objection that it is unwise to extrapolate general metaphysical truths from everyday experience, it seems to me wholly unobjectionable to say that the causal principle is basically another way of saying the first time is the other. Enjoys experiential support. Should we just ignore the uniform data of experience in support of premise one and behave as if it were just as likely as its opposite? Talk about being blind to the evidence. End quote. But I'll bet you that Craig would immediately object to the exact same logic if we simply plug in other empirically supported features of causality that don't happen to jive with his own personal theology. Watch me play a little game. I'm going to borrow Craig's own words to make an identical argument for the premise that whatever has an efficient cause must also have a material cause. I'm going to make up a word. Let's call that the double causal principle. As for the objection that it is unwise to extrapolate general metaphysical truths from everyday experience, it seems to me wholly unobjectionable to say that the double causal principle enjoys experiential support. Should we just ignore the uniform data of experience in support of the double causal principle and behave as if it were just as likely as its opposite? Talk about being blind to the evidence. The double standard here should be obvious. Now let's just come out and say it, guys. The real reason that Craig cherry picks from our empirical experience in order to posit an efficient cause without a material cause of the universe is because his presupposed theology instructs him to. Here it is, right from his mouth. Let me begin by affirming, quote is a quote, let me begin by affirming that Christian theology is committed to creatio ex nihilo. That is to say, the doctrine that God created the universe without any material cause. God is the efficient cause which produced the universe, and there was no material cause. He himself created the matter and energy. When we say that matter and energy were created out of nothing, we mean merely that, although created, they were not created out of anything. Craig is not working from the bottom up. All of his reasons here are ad hoc. That is to say, he's not like following rationality wherever it leads him. The inferences he makes are designed specifically to funnel toward and conclude with his own personal theology. And if this means, ignoring his own epistemic advice, then so be it. But it shouldn't be a surprise to us because this is how the apologetic game is played. Christian first, philosopher second. Of course, it doesn't stop us from pointing out the flaws in these rationalizations. Anyway, so let's do that. Craig calls it incoherent to say that the universe itself had a material cause because the universe is here defined as I'm quoting him, is here defined as the whole of material reality. The whole of material reality cannot have had a prior material cause because if it did, then it did not really begin to exist. You follow that? Now, before I say anything else about this, it should raise an eyebrow that when it becomes convenient for him, Dr. Craig not only acknowledges, but argues from the fact that the universe is qualitatively different from everything else that begins to exist, and that what is true of causation within the universe needn't apply to the universe as a whole. This alone should cast serious doubt on the cosmological argument. But he wants to have his metaphysical cake and eat it too. So, by the way, if you didn't know, metaphysical cake, very tasty. In any case, so there's actually two distinct objections contained within this statement, and they get sort of lumped together, so let me parse that out. The first is that for the physical universe to have been made out of something, that something would need to exist prior to the universe, and the second is that it would need to be physical. Okay, let's work backwards. First, the phrase material cause, just because it has the word material in it, does not necessarily mean physical cause. So Craig is equivocating here. He's making a language game. The material cause of something is just the stuff out of which it was formed, physical or otherwise. There's nothing incoherent about God forming the physical universe from some non-physical substance, especially if you already have absolutely no problem with God willing the universe to pop into existence from nothing whatsoever. Okay, now let's talk about the other objection. Notice Craig's careful use of the word prior here. He says the universe could not have had a prior material cause because the beginning of the universe was the beginning of time itself. But here's the thing. Who says that the material cause of the universe had to exist prior to the universe? Why can't, say, the material cause of the universe exists timelessly and enter into time at the moment of creation? Sounds fucking crazy, right? Well, it is. But try telling that to Craig. Quote, I want to suggest that we think of God's eternity like the singularity as the boundary of time. God is causally prior, but not chronologically prior to the universe. His changeless, timeless, eternal state is the boundary of time at which he exists without the universe. And at the moment of creation, God enters into time in virtue of his real relation to the created order and his knowledge of 10 facts, so that God is timeless without creation and temporal subsequent to creation. End quote. So I suspect that Dr. Craig is banking on nobody noticing that his argument for the plausibility of a timeless efficient cause would apply just as well to timeless material cause, and that his argument against a timeless material cause would apply just as well to a timeless efficient cause. But the problem is not merely that with Craig's own logic, if we apply it consistently, we get a material cause of the universe in addition to an efficient cause, or that we can have a material cause of the universe. The problem is that it allows for a material cause of the universe instead of an efficient cause. Like, well, okay, I'm going to let Craig do the explaining. Quote, the causal premise of the Kalam cosmological argument, namely everything begins to exist as a cause, leaves it an open question whether that cause is efficient or material, and is therefore a much more modest premise than everything that begins to exist has a material cause, or everything that begins to exist has an efficient cause. The ambiguity here is quite deliberate, and I don't think that we can call it modest, because it's a very calculated strategic move. Why wouldn't Craig simply say that everything which begins to exist has an efficient cause of its existence? I mean, after all, when we say that such and such was caused to exist, efficient causes are what we're talking about, because material causes aren't really causes at all. The material cause of X doesn't tell us how X came into being, or why, or by whom. So imagine you're standing in an art museum with Dr. Craig, which would be a really fun field trip, and you're looking at a marble statue, and you say to him, Dr. Craig, what caused this statue to begin existing? And he says, marble. Well, that doesn't answer your question, because the stuff that a thing happens to be made from is not what we're referring to when we talk about the cause of its existence. You notice the switcheroo happening here? The reason that Craig needs his first premise to exhibit this kind of elasticity is because of quantum mechanics, because on a very, 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 very small scale, we do have real observable examples of things coming into existence cause. They aren't coming into existence out of thing, but they do begin to exist spontaneously without anything having caused them to do so. And if Kalam's first premise does not allow for that, then it has to be false. And Craig knows that. But what we're left with now, I mean, this is a very, very different picture of this premise than the one we started out with when we first heard it. It's not intuitive anymore. It's not simple. It's not elegant. It's not straightforward. Now, I've explained why Craig's arguments against the universe having a material cause don't hold water, because they can be used against him. And now we have Craig allowing for things to begin existing without an efficient cause, so long as they have a material cause. Well, what does that even mean? I mean, what would it mean for the universe itself to have a material cause, because Craig allows for this, without an efficient cause? To come into being from something, but not by something. What would that even look like? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. I mean, you'd have a kind of non-universe stuff existing eternally in a timeless, changeless, non-spatial state, which spontaneously erupts into the temporal spatial state of stuff we call the universe. What is this stuff, really? How did it get there in the first place? I don't know. What is God, really? How did he get there in the first place? We would have to assume that this stuff, like God, would just be there, timeless, eternal. Now, Craig, we need to be fair about this. So Craig defines the universe as the whole of physical reality. So we have to assume that this timeless, changeless, eternal stuff whence the universe came is non-physical. Otherwise, we're not talking about the beginning of the universe anymore, but a change in states of the universe. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I mean, at this point, what reasons do we actually have left for thinking that the whole of physical reality necessarily had a beginning? I mean, Craig's arguments for the finitude of the past don't work against the timeless, changeless state of the universe any more than they work against a timeless, changeless state of God. So according to Craig's own metaphysics, it is entirely plausible that the universe, the whole of material reality, did actually begin to exist at the Big Bang. It simply became temporal, maybe even physical at the Big Bang. Now, I know the knee-jerk reaction to this would be to say that such a change has no potential to occur unless it was caused to occur. But the problem with that is that an atemporal universe becoming temporal is an event occurring, not a thing beginning to exist. And as such, it's not subject to Coulomb's first premise. You may think, I'm playing a little game here, but I'm not the one playing the game. Quote, my argument does not commit us to every event having a cause. What I deny is that things, substances endowed with properties can come into existence without a cause of any sort. End quote. Now, this is really shocking because Dr. Craig is a really big fan of the power of our intuitions. He always says that in addition to our experience, which I've already discussed, we know that Coulomb's first premise is true because our metaphysical intuitions tell us so. So you don't expect somebody with this view to make such a counterintuitive claim. I mean, why should we think that things always require causes, but events, happen spontaneously on their own for no reason at all? I can't say for sure, but I'll bet you it's got something to do with free will. Thought, deliberation, choices, these are all events. And it's no coincidence that Craig is a libertarian, which means he believes that we are irreducible free agents whose conscious decision-making processes are not constrained by will. Imagine that. Now, personally, I don't put much stock into the reliability of my primate brain's intuitions when it comes to the ultimate nature of reality, but I'll tell you this much. My intuition that events don't begin to occur uncaused is just as strong as my intuition that things don't begin to exist uncaused. So not only is Dr. Craig working backwards from his conclusion by cherry-picking from our experience, he does it by cherry-picking from our intuitions as well. But in any case, I want to be really clear that my project here is not to argue with Craig about this. Rather, I am granting all of his rules and applying them consistently. That's important because Craig doesn't do that. And then I'm just following them to their logical conclusion. Now, Craig himself may still object to the idea of a physical universe existing timelessly on the grounds that it would be incoherent since, remember he said earlier, matter and energy is never quiescent. By the way, quiescent means still, dormant, inactive. But this would be just another metaphysical double standard. Conscious minds are not quiescent either. And yet this never stopped him from positing just such a thing. So,